the Russian Federation presiding over the work of the Security Council of the United Nations in June 2014. Congratulations also go to the Republic of Korea for its outstanding presidency of the Security Council last month. President, allow me also to welcome the convening of today's meeting devoted to consideration of the Secretary-General's report on the renewal of the MINUSMA mission. It's no accident that the presentation of the report before us takes place precisely today on the 18th of June, the date of the first anniversary of the signing of the preliminary agreements for the presidential election and for the inclusive peace negotiations in Mali, signed in Ouagadougou. This seems to all go well despite the sudden deterioration of the security situation in the north of our country following attacks where Mali armed forces were targeted in carrying out their mission to secure the visit of the Mali Prime Minister to the city of Kidal on the 17th of May this year. That day, rebel Mali groups supported by hordes of terrorists decided to attack the Prime Ministerial delegation and the Malian armed forces that was protecting it within the governorate of Kidal. Those hybrid armed groups killed soldiers and executed in cold blood prefects and civil servants for the sole reason that they symbolized the attributes of the sovereignty of the Mali state in the region of Kidal. They also abducted and then held hostage several civilians before releasing them a few days later under pressure from MINUSMA. In so doing, they essentially voluntarily violated the preliminary agreement of Ouagadougou of 18th June 2013 and committed grave violations of international humanitarian law. The Republic of Mali welcomes the support of the international community through, inter alia, the Security Council Declaration of the 20th of May 2014 and the final communique of the ECOWAS Summit of the 31st of May 2014, condemning the aggression of 17th May against the Malian armed forces and reaffirming the necessary preservation of national unity, territorial integrity, as well as the secular and republican form of the state. The ECOWAS heads of state and government's actions are vindicated given the security threats facing Mali. The threats they faced in 2012 are still present. The hybrid nature of these actors and of these threats mean that today terrorists are allying with other actors in organized crime in Sahel. They're also allying with rebels. We saw this during the assault against Mali armed forces on 17th May in Kidal. The first eyewitnesses state that the assassinations against civil servants of the state in Kidal carry the hallmarks of a terrorist act. President, because the peace has its victories that are just as famous as those of war, we have decided to choose peace. And despite the barbaric numerous acts that we've suffered, acts condemned by the international community, including by the United Nations Security Council, the African Union, ECOWAS, as well as several bilateral and multilateral partners, the government of Mali remains more than ever driven by the constant concern to reconcile the Mali people. To do this, it's doing all it can to create the best conditions for national reconciliation, restoration of social cohesion, and consolidation of national unity. To that end, the President of the Republic, His Excellency Mr. Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, did not hesitate, not one moment, to call for a ceasefire to the Mali armed forces on the 21st of May, when the UN Secretary-General requested that of him. This gesture of appeasement considerably contributed to the signing of the ceasefire agreement on the 23rd of May 2014 between the Mali government and the armed groups and movements, under the supervision of His Excellency Mr. Mohamed Ould Abdelaziz, President of the Islamic Republic of Mauritania and Acting President of the African Union, whose leadership we hail in combating terrorism and his willingness to make the Sahel a region of peace, security, development and social well-being. Since the signing of that ceasefire agreement obtained thanks to the involvement of the United Nations and the African Union, the Mali government has kept calling on the armed groups and movements to show good faith and to engage in the path of dialogue. To give substance to its own determination to peacefully resolve the question of the North, the President of the Republic, Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, appointed the former Prime Minister Modibo Keïta as the High Representative of the President of the Republic for inclusive inter-Malian dialogue. The High Representative has as his mission to establish and maintain a climate of trust between all the parties involved in the dialogue, to facilitate exchanges and to contribute to rapprochement of points of view in light of the interests of the Mali people. He can take any initiative he wishes with a view to conclusion of a lasting definitive peace agreement. Under this mandate, the High Representative of the President of the Republic has already made contact in Ouagadougou and in Nouakchott with all armed groups and movements at odds with the Mali government to signify the firm determination of the President of the Republic and of the government to privilege dialogue over weapons and to spare no effort to create the best conditions possible for the conclusion of a comprehensive, lasting peace agreement on the crisis in the north of Mali. The High Representative of the President also urged armed groups and movements to reiterate their commitment to the Ouagadougou Agreement, which they did. He's currently pursuing the process of contacts with the Mali government, national, regional and international actors concerned by the peace process in Mali. He's working in close cooperation with the Special Representative of the UN Secretary General for Mali, as well as with other special envoys from regional organizations. As to the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission established in March 2013 by the transitional president, in step with Article 21 of the preliminary Ouagadougou Agreement, the law that established it was adopted by the National Assembly in March 2014. It remains now to appoint the members. The Minister of National Reconciliation is working on this actively. It goes without saying that these two mechanisms, the High Representative and the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission, are complementary and are mutually reinforcing. The first work towards concluding a definitive lasting peace agreement is the first goal, and the second is the reconciliation of hearts and minds. Naturally, this is going to be a long-term undertaking. President, Mali is willing to envisage with its friends, its partners, and others any mechanism that effectively and efficiently resolves the crisis in support of those efforts. To that end, Algeria, to whom we pay tribute, has undertaken, at the request of the President of the Republic of Mali, exploratory consultations between all armed groups and movements in the north of Mali with a view to developing a shared platform to serve as a basic document for inclusive inter-Malian negotiations envisaged to take place in days to come. The Mali government has reiterated its confidence in Algeria and asks it to pursue its efforts so that those negotiations conclude as soon as possible with a lasting definitive peace agreement. Along those lines, the holding of Algiers on 16th June 2014 of the third high-level meeting on the inter-Malian dialogue process, which brought together the foreign ministers and heads of delegation from Algeria, Mali, Mauritania, Chad, the Niger, Burkina Faso, as well as the Special Representative, the Secretary General of the United Nations for Mali, our friend Bert Koenders, who is here and who I'd like to commend for his active participation and his high-quality contribution to that meeting. And next to him we have also the High Representative of the African Union for Mali and the Sahel, the former Burundi President. The participants at this meeting commended progress achieved under the aegis of Algeria in creating conducive conditions for inter-Malian inclusive dialogue and highlighted a very large, broad convergence of views on the guidelines of the agreed approach. Moreover, they noted that the conclusions that the 6 armed groups and movements reached by them in the north of Mali, respectively on the 9th and 14th June 2014, as well as that adopted by the fourth meeting of the Strategic Bilateral Algerian-Malian Committee adopted on 15th of June 2014 in Algiers, provides a promising opportunity that needs to be capitalized immediately to engage negotiations on the path for inclusive inter-Malian dialogue. They also stressed the importance and urgency of carrying out the initial phase of dialogue in Algiers. It should be held on time and as planned. Finally, the participants voiced their willingness to provide support to those efforts with a view to achieving the goals of the international community that it assigned in Resolution 2100 of the Security Council, the relevant decisions of the African Union and of ECOWAS, as well as of the pertinent provisions of the preliminary Ouagadougou Agreement, with a view to preserving the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Mali and to bolster its national unity. To that end, it was agreed with the Algerians that a certain number of key principles would be observed during that process. The first principle was the principle of inclusiveness. It's important for all the partners that have influence and necessary capacities to contribute to the process be involved in that process. Second principle is the principle of transparency. It was agreed that, as far as possible, elements of agreement or elements of discussion should be shared with all the partners who have an interest in the process. Thirdly, the need for coordination and consistency from all initiatives taken on Mali, and to ensure that those initiatives are converged and that a mechanism should be found that can facilitate the cohesion of efforts undertaken in Algiers, with also the necessity of having a better contribution from partners, including from the United Nations. We would like to see play the key role, playing the key role in this process. The government of Mali believes, with the Conference of Heads of State and Government of ECOWAS, that to help our country restore its sovereignty throughout the country, including in Kidal, the Security Council must bolster the mandate of MINUSPA and to also give it the contingent and capacities to duly carry out its mission to guarantee the application of the Ouagadougou Agreement of 18th of June. To that end, we condemn the fact that 1 year after the start of that mission, which it still does not have necessary staff and logistic means to properly discharge its mandate in a particularly volatile context. Currently, now, let me share with your august forum the expectations of the Mali government with a view to the extension of the mandate. As concerning stabilization of the regions in the north of the country, my country would like to see the future MINUSMA mandate include a clear provision on the swift deployment of MINUSPA beyond the major urban centres of the regions in the north of Mali, particularly around villages and in nomad lands. That proposal takes into account the way of life of nomad populations in the north of Mali who prefer to live outside the major urban centres. That would allow us to bridge the security gap in grey areas or in areas of lawlessness where the populations are most exposed to the infiltration of armed groups that haven't signed up to the Ouagadougou Accords and who are affiliated to terrorist networks such as Akim, Mujahou, Ansar Dine, and other drug trafficking groups, as was the case in 2012. My delegation would like also to draw the attention of the Council to the need to authorise the implementation of joint operations between the Mali Armed Forces and MINUSMA to, as far as possible, restrict the freedom of movement of non-party armed groups to the Ouagadougou agreements affiliated to terrorist and drug trafficking groups. Similarly, Mali wishes the support of MINUSPA to accelerate the cantonment process and of DDR with a view to isolating and disarming non-parties armed groups and who are affiliated to terrorists in the north of Mali, which are currently trying to reverse the security gains achieved during Operation Serval, which was done with the support of the Chad and Mali armed forces. Similarly, Mali believes it would be wise to include the following elements in the future Security Council resolution on MINUSMA. 1. Firm support from MINUSMA to strict implementation of the ceasefire in all its elements. Returning to the pre-17th of May positions, reinvigorating the follow-up mechanisms for the Ouagadougou Agreement, and a reopening of peace negotiations. 2. Firm support from MINUSMA for the cantonment and for DDR of armed groups that have signed up to Ouagadougou. 3. Support from the Mali state by MINUSMA in the redeployment of the administration and in the rebuilding of regions in the north of Mali. 4th, a substantial shift of the MINUSMA footprint from the south to regions in the north where there is a genuine urgent need for stabilization and rebuilding. 5. Support from MINUSMA and from the international community to the holding of local and regional elections in the future. 6. Establishment of an international commission of inquiry announced in the ceasefire agreement of 23rd May 2014. 7. The establishment of a benchmark for, as our Anglophone friends say, at least to help follow up the implementation of the mandate in the new MINUSMA resolution. President, I would like, at this point, on behalf of the people and government of Mali, to pay solemn tribute to all the valiant soldiers and civilians from Mali and from the Friends of Mali who have laid down their life in the struggle against obscurantism, terrorism, and violent extremism in Mali. Moreover, I would like, on behalf of the people of Mali, of its government and of its president, His Excellency Mr. Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, to express our profound gratitude to the French and Chad authorities, to the United Nations, to ECOWAS, to the African Union, to the European Union, to the Organization of the Islamic Conference, and to TCCs, and to MINUSMA. We commend MINUSMA, its personnel, in particular Special Representative of the United Nations Secretary General for Mali, Mr. Albert Gerald Koundés, as well as all bilateral and multilateral partners of Mali, for their steadfast support that they have provided us at the very height of the crisis and during the terrorist occupation that we have been victims of and throughout the last year. Our profound thanks go to all of you here. I thank you. I thank His Excellency Mr. Diop for his statement. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. I now invite Council members to informal consultations to continue our discussion on the subject. The meeting is adjourned.